Okay, let's do this. So this past weekend, a brand new animated film was released into theaters entitled Rally Road Racers. I'm pretty sure most of you haven't even seen this film, and I'm also pretty sure most of you haven't even heard of it. If you haven't, I don't blame you, because this just doesn't seem like the kind of animated film that will go on your radar, and for good reason. But nevertheless, I have seen it, and I am going to talk about it because I certainly have thoughts. Especially considering this film is by Vanguard Animation. And if that studio name sent a shiver down your spine, I sincerely apologize. For those that don't know this studio, you've probably heard of their films, which includes the likes of Valiant, Happily Never After, Space Chimps, and Gnome Alone. Not exactly the most impressive catalog, ain't it? Yeah, if you couldn't tell by my tone, I really haven't been a huge fan of Vanguard Animation's films. In fact, I'd go as far as to consider those films I mentioned some of the worst animated films ever made. They're filled with some of the worst traits you'll see in animated films, from having unfunny and poorly written stories, very bad and ugly animation, as well as boring and archetypal characters. None of their films have impressed me in the slightest, and it's honestly astonishing that they are still able to keep making animated films, especially ones that are this bad. And I'm honestly astonished that this new film from them somehow managed to get a theatrical release. Gnome Alone couldn't get a theatrical release and had to get shipped off to Netflix, and yet this film is good enough for theaters. Don't ask me to explain that. Needless to say, my expectations going into this new film from them were set very, very low. This film met my expectations. Look, I wasn't expecting much, but I was at least hoping that this film would be better than Vanguard Animation's previous films. But no, this film is exactly what you would expect from them. It's a pretty bad animated film that might go down as being one of the worst of the decade so far. In fact, this is the first animated film I saw in an empty movie theater in 4 years. The last time I saw a brand new animated film in a theater all by myself was Playmobil the Movie, and knowing how bad that film was, that's not a good sign. The story of the film follows a slow Loris played by Jimmy O. Yang. He's named Z, and he wants to be a racer, but everyone in his village, including his granny played by Lisa Liu, thinks he shouldn't be racing. One day, though, him and his granny discover that his village is about to be torn down by an evil frog named Archie Vainglorious, played by John Cleese, who wants to do so because reasons. Not wanting his town torn down, Z makes a bet to save his town by beating him in a race. He then gets the help of a goat named Nash, played by J.K. Simmons, who helps to make him a better race car driver to compete in the Silk Road race. And so, Z enters the race and must defeat Archie in order to save the town. Yeah, it's that kind of plot. And it's exactly as paint by numbers as I made it out to be. This film has no surprises or tricks up its sleeves and was so predictable that you can guess exactly where it's gonna go and doesn't really give us anything new to offer. As soon as we see the construction equipment swarm the slow Loris village, you know exactly how the rest of the film is gonna play out, and it basically checks off every generic beat you would expect in a film like this. The hero making the bet with the villain, him wondering what he's gotten himself into, the talk with the old teacher, the training montage, the start of the race, scenes with the love interest. Yeah, there's a love interest in this film. I'll get to her in a bit. The rug getting pulled, the sad montage, the get back on your feet again scene, the big win, and the happy conclusion. All complete with the generic never give up message. It's pretty much all here, and they pretty much do nothing new with it. We don't even get attached to the village at the beginning of the film, which makes Z's ultimate goal hard to relate to. And look, like I said before, animated films being predictable doesn't automatically make them bad. It all comes down to the execution and what you bring new to the table. One thing that could help elevate a film like this is having good humor. And this film just doesn't have that. The humor in this film really is not funny. At all. I didn't laugh once at a single joke in the film. In fact, some of the humor actually felt pretty dated. Like, they make jokes involving hashtags, and the villain pulls out a selfie stick at one point. Yeah, a selfie stick. In a film released in 2023. It even tries to break the fourth wall a couple of times, like having one of the characters break the camera lens, and it just looked really desperate. Another thing that really holds this film back is the animation. This film does not look very good. While the character designs themselves are passable at best, the models looked pretty fuzzy or rubbery compared to other animated films with anthropomorphic animals, and sometimes their lips don't even match what they're saying. It would help if the racing scenes were pretty cool and exciting, but they're not. The cars move so clunkily and awkwardly that it doesn't feel thrilling. They even try recreating some of the racing moves that we've seen in other animated films, like that leap that Doc Hudson did in Cars 3, and it just looks so rough. Though the worst thing about the animation was easily the effects animation. That was pretty unforgivable stuff. Most of the textures looked pretty lazily done. Stuff like water looked like jello, and the cars didn't even leave tracks in the snow or ice when they race, or if they do, it's only there for like half a second. This is just really not good animation. Another thing that could potentially elevate a story like this is the characters. But these characters are pretty boring and paper thin and aren't interesting in the slightest. Z is your standard starry-eyed protagonist who wants to be a big racer and save his town from ultimate destruction. He really has nothing to offer that we can't get anywhere else and just comes off as a boring blank slate. The film tries to throw in people doubting him at the beginning to try to give him some self-doubt, but they don't really go anywhere with that, so I wasn't really able to relate to him at all. The other characters also fall into the same categories too. Nash being the boring teacher that helps guide his pupil to greatness, his granny being doubtful at the beginning, but then supporting him near the end, and even his love interest Shelby, played by Chloe Bennett, starting off working for the main villain, but soon falling in love with him and leaving Archie behind. As for why she was working with him, I think it's because Archie has blackmail on her or something like that. I don't know, it isn't explained very well. And then there's Archie, who is probably the most annoying character in the film. This was such an obnoxious villain that was pretty much constantly gloating all the time he was evil, to the point where he asks his minions to make his own devious laughs for him, and even has them control his own evil theme music. And like I said earlier in the plot summary, I don't even know why he's destroying the village. He's just doing it because he's evil. And he also has to win this race because apparently he's not the head of his own business. He's the son of the owner, which makes even less sense. Like, this villain really wasn't properly thought out, and it made him such an obnoxious character by the end. There's also other racer characters in the film, but none of them are really all that memorable, so I feel like it's best to move on. All these characters are is just a waste of this talented cast. Seriously, all of these actors are too good for this film. So I know what you're all thinking. Was there anything good in this film? And yes, there's one thing. But only one. And that's this very strange homage to the music video for Take On Me. No, I'm not kidding. The film literally recreates the rotoscope's comic book look of the video and even recreates some of the shots in it, and it's actually pretty good. No, I'm not kidding. Despite it being out of nowhere and having no effect on the plot, the animation was well done, it was actually kind of funny, and it's not a bad use of the song. I'd go as far as say it's probably the most creative thing Vanguard Animation has ever made. But that's really the only thing the film has going for it. Other than that, Rally Road Racers is really not a good film. I apologize that this review is much shorter than you would expect, but there's really not much else for me to say about it. It's exactly the kind of film you'd expect out of Vanguard Animation. A pretty unimpressive animated film with a story that is by the numbers and not funny in the slightest, animation that's pretty clunky and has some obvious errors, and characters that are paper thin and just waste their talented cast. This is a film you really don't need to see. If you want to see anything from this film, just watch the Take On Me scene. It's on YouTube, and it's actually pretty clever. But you can skip the full film. It's not worth it. And with that said, I'm gonna give it a 2. That's probably the most reasonable grade I could give this thing. There's a lot of great animated movies that's going to be coming out this summer. Across the Spider-Verse, Elemental, Nimona, Ruby Gillman, Mutant Mayhem, Monkey King, a lot of great stuff that I cannot wait to see. But as far as I'm concerned, this is one you certainly don't need a race to theaters to see.
But no questions asked.
You would do that?
But why?
Okay, there was 2 questions right off the line. See you tomorrow.